At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Here in Greenville County, we have 8 different places where a 911 call can be answered.
It is the largest county in South Carolina. It's a challenge.
The type of information that a telecommunicator gets from Radius Plus is location-based technology. You can see where the caller is, if they have a medical issue, if they speak a different language. They're immediately able to text to that caller in their native language. It reduces response times because it immediately gets first responders where they need to be.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is supported by sponsored by InDigital, as well as Rapid Deploy and Carbine. And as always, a big shout out to patrons. Thank you so much for everything, and we are back. There are several episodes that have gone on before this one. They've been lined up, and there are just a few conferences left in this year, and I believe I get maybe about a month off from conferences. Still doing episodes and everything, but I won't be traveling until the very end of January. So it'll be a good break. But there's tons of things coming up, so make sure to be on the lookout for all of it. It is always good to be here and to be sharing all of these stories. So thank you so much for everything, from the sponsors to patrons and all of you who listen, watch, share, and support. Thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart. It is October 18th, 2021, and we are about to get started here with this episode. I'm excited to have my guest here. We're going to be talking about not only his 911 story, but also a little more from that story of some hearing loss and how it relates to dispatch as well. So I'm excited to have my guest here, and we're about to get into it. My guest today is Tim Prugh, and he is retired dispatch out of South Bend City, as well as St. Joe County, with about 29 years total in public safety. Hey. How is it going, sir?
Good. How are you?
I am doing all right. I'm just getting back from the Alabama conference. I had a little medical issue out there where I think, sometimes we end up just going and going and going, and we're not paying attention to ourselves, right? And our bodies finally just say, if you're not going to take a break, I'm going to make you take a break.
I'm going to make you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that is pretty much what happened to me this past weekend. I think I've slept more in this past weekend than I have, I don't know when, but I'm feeling good. But man, I was going through some shit, and my body definitely said, hey, it's time to stop, and we're going to make you stop. And it definitely put me on my ass. So for those who are watching and listening, yes. For those of you watching and listening, pay attention to your body and take care of yourself, because I seem to enjoy learning the hard way, which I really don't. I don't like learning the hard way, but it happened. And for whatever reason, it seems to happen in October. I don't know what's up with this month, but holy moly, it is something else. So, welcome, Tim, and I'm
Thank
glad to
you.
have you
Appreciate you
here.
having me. Appreciate you
Yeah,
having me.
yeah, this is going to be interesting. So we've been talking on through email and everything about not only your story, but this hearing loss that you had, um,
Yeah.
which we will get to here momentarily. But so everyone who's watching and listening, to learn more about you, and of course myself as well. How did you get into dispatching to begin with?
Well, I graduated from college from Ball State University in Indiana
Hmm.
with a degree in telecommunications. And back in the 80s, it wasn't really known as that. It was actually known as radio, television, motion pictures. And so I had worked in radio and television at a couple of different places for some years, and then found myself unemployed and looked through the one ads, and one day saw an ad for dispatching at the police station, and thought that might be something I can do, and went and filled out the 12-page application, and went through the process, and uh, got told to hang on as long as I could, and finally got told I was hired, and went in, and we had the interview, and they had me listen to a tape, and it was one of those tape recorders that you carried around with you back in the 80s and sat it on the table, and they put in the big cassette, played The Pursuit, and said, write down everything that you hear. And apparently I must have heard enough, because they said, okay, that's great. Nobody else has heard that much, so we're going to hire you. And um, the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. Okay, so hold on. Let's go back a little bit, because this application was 12 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. All of your job, the back before they made it easier to do all of the background checks and all
Mhm.
of that stuff. And boy, they wanted to know everything. So, the whole 9 yards, the big application, the two interviews, the background check, the criminal history, the whole 9 yards. So the polygraph, all of that.
Oh, so
Yeah,
you
it
had to
was
have a polygraph as well then.
oh yeah. Yeah. First one I ever had. That was an interesting experience for sure.
So is that nerve-wracking when you go in? I've never
Oh my,
had one before, and
yeah.
so
Yeah. It was like, okay, what do I say? Well, just say yes or no. Okay, yes. it
right,
was
yeah, no
it was
explanations, it's just
pretty
yes or no.
interesting. All of that, all of this, and there's so much more stuff apparently that was back then than is now. So, more chords and more. Oh, it's very intimidating. But
Oh,
it
man.
was. I
Yeah.
look back at it now and just laugh about
Well, for sure,
it.
because I know when I got hired in the first dispatch center that I was in, it was actually a small police department. I went in and had my interview, and that was it. There was no typing test, there was no written, there was no audio, there was nothing like
No,
that. It
yeah,
wasn't until a few years later, when I was trying to get into a central dispatch, that I did have a test like that. There was about 20 to 25 of us, something like that, and we did something similar where they played some audio. They played it over the PA system, and those systems usually aren't the greatest anyway. And then you add the radio traffic between dispatch and an officer who sounds
mm,
like is kind of eating his microphone, and you're writing everything down, right? And I luckily, just like you, I ended up getting as much information as they wanted, and I was able to make it through. Um, that's pretty interesting, though. That that's one of the first things they had you listen to that audio, and you start writing it down, and then bam, you're in there. Now, did you have was there ever any time before you said yes that you could actually sit in dispatch?
no, not that I did. I mean, I had gone to the guy that was the director at the time, who was also a policeman at that time. All of the supervisors in that particular dispatch center were all policemen. The dispatchers were civilians, but the supervisors were policemen. And the guy that was the quote unquote director, um, great big hulking guy who everybody called Bear, and he was huge, a huge guy, and he was my contact, and I would come into the police station every once in a while. He brought me back and showed me the room and kind of explained a little bit, but that was the extent. There was no sit down and observe. Nothing like that. So it was like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm getting myself in for, but we'll see what happens.
So this is back in the 80s. What was training like? Actually, before we get to the training, do you remember what it looked like when you walked in? So you walk in for that first day. What is it that you're seeing? Do you remember everything kind of the way it was set up?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. We had it was like well, the first thing you noticed, the room used to be a jail way back in the day. And so the ventilation was really poor. So the first thing you noticed when you walked in the room was the fact that it was dark. They kept all the lights off except for small little portable lights you had at your own console. And everybody flipped them up toward the ceiling, so you get a little bit of white light on the ceiling. But what you really noticed was the layer of cigarette haze that hung across the top of the ceiling. And the air return in the room was not that great. So there was always a perpetual layer of cigarette haze, because back then everybody smoked in the room.
Yeah.
And it was dark. No radio, or television or anything like that going on. Just everybody sitting at their own consoles. The consoles were great big, huge metal hulking things that went all the way across one side of the room and front, and then there was another big hulking one in the back, and then in the middle of these two were two separate stations that sat on each side that were the 911 center, or the 911 consoles. And they had the same. We had just in the last couple of years, when I came on, gone to a CAD system. Before that, it was all cards, and so they were in the process of getting everything set up with CAD, and dealing with all of the unexpected crashes. And so when I started, one of the first things I was told was the best thing you can do is to learn your beats, because this computer crashes all the time, and we'll go back to cards. So it's a person that has an idea of where the police beats are that will do really well. Other than that, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be asking everybody, and people are going to be too busy to want to pay attention to you. So, but the room was always great, and it was that way for probably the first 10 or 11 years that I was there before anything was ever done and updated.
How many people did you have working at a time then?
There was, well, let me think a minute. There was the primary police channel that was all the way in the front of the room, and with their back to everybody else in the room. And next to them at the other end of this hulking console was the NCIC operator. And they had the prime spot because they were directly across from where the break room was. So they could get up and if we always had to have a headset on. And the NCIC operator was the closest one to the break room, so they could actually get up and walk into the room if they had a decent length cord. And there was only one other dispatcher that bought that had bought a special cord, and she had probably a 25-foot extension on her headset cord. And so when she worked primary all the way at the other side of the room, she could walk all the way and stand in the break room and get, whatever she needed out of there and then come all the way back. But and then they were the front, and then behind those two were the 911 console operators, and there was usually two of us. And then in the back, the big hulking console in the back was the supervisor and the fire dispatcher. So there were generally, if we had a spare 911 operator, then we had 6. If not, there were 5 of us. So.
Oh man, just listening to you describe it, all I see is like NASA. Like,
oh my gosh, these things were huge, and the computer monitors were set into these hulking consoles, and then on the wall before when we were on cards, at the very front of the room, all the way across the whole front of the wall, was this massive map that lit up and had all of the police beats written out on it, and no streets or anything, just the outlines where the beats were. And when you got a dispatch card, we had it was like a time clock, and you drop the card in the time clock thing, and then it punched the card, and you'd pull it out, and then there were slots for each one of the officers that were working, and you would put that card in that slot, and when it did, it would flip a light on in that beat that went red, so that you knew you had an officer on a call in that particular beat. And you were constantly taking these cards out. You always knew who was sitting on channel 1, which is primary police, because you could always hear because they're constantly taking these cards and putting them in this thing.
Right.
And finally that machine broke, and we rejoiced. Everybody loved it, because then all we did was just took a pen and wrote the times on. And it was a great day when the machine broke, because we no longer used it. And the map, we still used the slots, but the map, slowly but surely, all the lights died. And so we just used the slots for that. And it was a trip. Great big huge maps on these great big boards that were on a folding thing. So if you needed to go find out where something was, you could go to the map display thing, and you'd have to flip them like posters. Oh, it was just looking back, it's just crazy. I don't know how we did it.
So, okay, I'm thinking about this right now. Like I can picture it the way you are explaining it. And so you go in and you start your training. Like, how did that even? Did they bring you up to it and we're like, okay, once you scan this, it's going to show it here, these are your different beats and all this other stuff. I mean, and also thinking about the fact that your monitors were set into the consoles, so you're looking down,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, what was that like for your
and
neck?
and it's not that, and it's not, they weren't the they weren't the multicolor console or monitors. We're talking the green letters and the black background, and oh yeah, it was terrible. And it was that plus the whoever was working NCIC had a dot matrix printer. And so anytime somebody ran something, it had to be printed, and they printed in triplicate. And oh Lord, you were constantly keying up to dispatch somebody, and you're hearing it in the background. And it was so hard to hear.
That really takes me back.
Oh, it was just it was comical. I mean, it's nowadays. But when I started training, it was there was no classroom stuff. When I hired, they hired 4 of us, And one immediately quit because they got a better offer at a private sector job. And so then there were three of us, and so they put each of us on a shift. Okay, you're going to midnights, you're going to days, you're going to afternoons, and there was no classroom training. There was no any kind of that. It was into the frying pan, and you did not have a designated trainer. I ended up being assigned day shift, and so all of the ladies that worked on days, there was every dispatch, there were all ladies, with the exception of one guy who had used to been a policeman, but was done. He had retired, and it was well known he didn't train. So he was always, when he was supposed to sit with the trainee, somebody else had to do it. And so it was sit down and, okay, this is what I do. This is what I do. This is how you do this. Okay, it's your turn. And it was trial by fire, literally. And over the years, we saw, the washout level was just horrendous because there was no real training program. So it was like, if you can handle this, then good. If not, well, maybe this isn't the job for you.
Right.
So, yeah, but
so how many hours did you work per shift? Was it 8 or 12?
Well, it was 8.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 8 as long as you were training. Once you were done training, all bets were off. Because when I started, the deal was when somebody called in sick and they needed somebody to fill their place, they had a sign-up sheet in the break room for voluntary overtime. But when nobody signed up, it became a free-for-all. And they would start at the top of the list, the highest seniority person, and they would make a phone call. They'd ask the people on the floor, and if nobody wanted it, they went to the list and they made a phone call to every single dispatcher. And the first person that answered the phone wins. And so, unbeknownst to me, everybody else had gotten the brilliant idea of getting an answering machine. So, the rule was never answer the phone when you're not working and you're at home. And to make sure your spouse or your girlfriend or whoever, make sure they know if somebody calls and asks for you, you're not there. You are not there. And I was brought up to always understand that if somebody called, you answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, not a good thing. And so when you got called in, it was an 8-hour shift. There was no 4s or anything like that. And if for some reason no one answered the phone at all, then the lowest seniority person on the floor had to stay. And which meant you were working a 16-hour shift. And those were brutal, just brutal. And, now they've got it so that they have to split it. After many, many years, they finally figured, okay, well, we need to put a day or some time in between there. But way back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was none of that. So that you could end up coming to work and work 16-hour days, 3-4 days in a row. And it was just brutal. So
yeah, I mean, it sounds like it, and I can completely relate. When I ended up moving from Florida back to Southwest Michigan, it was the Central Dispatch in Allegan County, actually the county that I grew up in. It was the same way there. So we worked 12s, but we also had our force enlist. And if you volunteered, and you were, pretty high up, you would go to the bottom of that list. But
Hmm.
there were times that even if you were at the bottom of the list, if you're working, you're still possibly going to get that if nobody answers. I mean, if it's just like a 4 hour or something like that, then it would go to whoever's higher than you. But otherwise, it would get split up three ways, and you would have to take one of those shifts. And
Hmm.
that would suck, especially if you lived far away like I did. I lived about 45 minutes away from the dispatch
Ooh.
center. So I would sometimes volunteer for it so that I could choose, because if you volunteered, you got to choose
Yeah.
which
Oh, yeah.
which increment that you wanted. So I would always choose the 9 or the 5A to 9A, because I worked midnight shift, so I could just do it all 16 in one shot instead of having to do my 12, go home for a couple hours, and then come back for, the rest of that, then go home, sleep, and then come back for another 12 hours, which, oh, it was horrible. Yeah, no, I can
Yeah. Yeah.
completely relate to you.
Time to make
Uh,
the donuts. Yeah. Meet yourself coming and going.
right. Yes, exactly. That's
Oh my
exactly how you would
gosh.
be, like the old,
This
Dunkin'
is,
Donut guy who's like, "I
that's
already
it.
made the donuts."
Most of the people probably don't have any clue what I'm talking about, but
Oh,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
used to love those commercials. Yes. Yep. They'd be making the donuts the whole time and then be coming in and then leaving. It's like, "Where are you going?" "I'm gonna go make the donuts. I already made the donuts."
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And when later on through the years, they started we went from that system to when they got tired of everybody having answering machines, they bought beepers and everybody carried beepers, and that was
Oh,
that
no
was
way.
interesting. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that was interesting. You're in the middle of shopping at Walmart, and your hip starts vibrating, and okay, wait a minute, I got to call work. And find a phone, and okay, well, you're mandatory. You have to come in on afternoon shift,
Ugh.
and then your whole plan, your whole schedule is thrown into absolute chaos. And what was worst is uh, when you had that thing and it went off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and especially if you forgot that you were on call,
Oh.
and you stayed up until midnight, 12:30, went to bed. The thing went off at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, well, guess what? You got to be here at 6 o'clock in the morning for day shift, and oh, that was just crazy. And uh, then they made a list where there was a voluntary uh, schedule that was made for the entire month, and people would sign up, and the high seniority people would only have to sign up a certain number of shifts per month, and then as it went down, the lower you got, the more shifts you had to cover, and the bottom 10 people in seniority would just get stuck with whatever was left over.
Ugh.
So and that all that served to do was drive the turnover rate, because people would come in and they'd be happy and they'd want to, how you first start and you want all the recall you can get, you want all the overtime you can get, because this is great money. But
Right.
then it's like, be careful what you wish for. And it's like, I don't want to have anything more to do with that. No, thank you. So
Yeah.
that unfortunately, mandatory overtime seems to be one of the big necessary evils of our industry. But I wish there was a way, and I applaud dispatch centers that are sensitive to that,
Mhm.
um, especially administrations. If you've got a director, or a supervisor, anybody like that who is sensitive to that, if you guys out there that are still in dispatch, if you have somebody like that, appreciate them, because they are worth more than gold, because they're certainly the minority. Most supervisors, it seems like you put a title behind their name and they completely forget what it was like when they were on the floor. So when you find one that's relatable and has no problem helping and keeping their the people that work with them, when they keep their own best interest at the forefront of their mind. Those people are godsends. So
yeah, those are definitely the ones that you want, right? I know that there's some centers where, one specifically where there's supervisors, so dispatch is all on the floor, right? But the supervisor, their console is like on almost like on a little stage. It's
mhm.
above, looking over everyone, and they sometimes jump in, other times they don't. They're just asking questions or whichever. But like for myself, and all the other supervisors that I worked with in Allegan, we were right on the floor, on the line with everyone working the whole time. And, if there was time for someone to get up to go, we would just pick up the slack and do what we had to do. But we always did it as a team. So that was always good to have that. Plus, we had deputy director and director who both came from the chair. So more so the deputy director than the director. The director was usually in meetings or working with other department heads and stuff. But the deputy director would come in and every so often and just say, anybody need anything? You got to use a bathroom. You want to get something to eat? And she would sit down at the console and start taking calls or working the radio or whichever. So that was always good to be able to have that, because as you know, and those who are watching and listening, whether you know or not, we don't always get a chance to get up and do anything. A lot of times we're just sitting there. We
Yeah,
barely have enough time to eat or use the restroom. It gets
yeah,
crazy.
they're those. I was talking to somebody that I used to work with not long ago, and
Mhm.
or we were having a conversation not long ago, and we were actually talking about a couple of the former supervisors that we had over the years. And this when I first came on, the supervisor, I was assigned a midnight shift, and I had never worked midnight shift at the police station. I mean, I trained all of my training on afternoons and days. So I showed up for my first shift on midnights and was like, okay, here's a new guy. I don't know you guys, but okay.
Yeah.
Never talked to you, never worked with you. But, you know, I quickly fell into to the mix with the people that I worked with on midnights, who were some of the most incredible people around. I mean, uh, each person was a character and had a personality that made them an individual and made the shift worth being there. And I don't know, in working with other shifts over the years, I had that as well at different times. But in my mind, those are the days, they call them the salad days. Those are the days, when everybody uh, did things so much different than they do nowadays. There was less worry about liability. There was less worry about protocol and so many of those things. The job got done, and it got done well. When it came time to do the job, everybody knew what they were doing. They pulled in and did what they were supposed to do. But when there was downtime, it wasn't, there was always something going on. I mean, whether it was throwing cards, and hardly ever nowadays would that ever be possible, because it just seems like anymore, people don't have the ability to try and use common sense to figure out their own issues. But in my first winter that I worked a midnight shift, our slowest night we had 12 calls in 8 hours, and they were all before midnight, so it was just dead. Guys are hitting squelch buttons to make sure that there's even anything going on. Is my radio even working?
Right.
And we're we're sitting at a table throwing cards all night long. And but we had a supervisor that made sure that we knew what we were doing. That
Mhm.
if he was very clear on, if somebody was tired, if somebody wasn't feeling good, man, get up and go take a break. Go put your head back for a little bit. I'll cover your channel. I'll take care of you. And if the phones start ringing and we need you, we'll come and get you. Obviously, you just worked 16 hours. Go get some rest. We'll cover for you. And so, that was just, it was amazing to have a shift that worked like that. So, and I hope there are people that still do that, because that really made the job worth doing.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because we had a few times in the winter as well that we were able to do that. And we were not far from Lake Michigan. So every time
Mhm.
it would snow, you get that lake effect snow, you get those fat flakes and everything. And we'd get just a lot of those warnings where sometimes people would actually listen to the news and they would stay home, and
Yeah.
we would have just hours where there wasn't really anything going on. And I remember one person who, this one time, I mean, I know that there were more times, but this one specifically where, we had them go ahead and just go to the quiet room and just chill out and, just close their eyes for a little bit. And it was the same way. We had a little portable that we gave them so that we could call back to them if we needed them to run back. And I'm pretty sure for like 3 hours, like we didn't need them because we're just sitting there and we were playing Scrabble or Uno. I don't remember what it was, but we were playing something, just letting the time go by, and officers would just call out status check and we would do the same thing jokingly. And there wasn't anything going on. But it was those moments that it was good to be in there, because we were helping each other out, just like you're explaining as well. And it's what makes it also worth being there with your team. You're building that camaraderie with everyone. You're like, just go and do what you got to do, and we'll take it from here. Do you remember in the beginning though? We kind of we kind of went far, but do you remember in the beginning some of the first calls that you ended up taking once you had gone through the training and all?
Yeah. Well, I was sitting pondering that the other day when I got some of the questions you wanted. And
Uh-huh.
one of the, working midnights, we used to get a lot of burglary calls and a
Mhm.
burglar alarm calls. And again, I talked to somebody that I worked with used to work with not long ago, and we talked about um, some of the alarm calls we had. One of the funniest ones we had a guy that had pulled into a parking lot and was sitting there working on his paperwork, and way pre-laptop days, sitting there
Mhm.
writing out his report. And we put out a call that there was an audible burglar alarm, and he keyed up and said, I'm a block away, I'll check it out. And he said, it's everything secure, you can disregard anybody else, no big deal. And so we disregarded any other unit, and a few minutes later we got a call from the supervisor. And he said he was only a block or so away. And we told him, man, he goes, because I'm parked in the front and the whole front window is busted out. And so, yeah,
Oh,
somebody busted the window and took a bunch of stuff and ran off. So we wondered whether he even had made the scene, just thinking, oh, it's got to be a false trip, no big deal.
right.
And, but, things like that. And I had a lady call one night that I took a 911 call, and the lady, the apartments that she lived in, their mailboxes, these were really old apartments, and the mailboxes on the front of the doors had a lid that you used to lift up, so that when they delivered milk back in the day, they would come up and lift the top of the lid thing and then just set the milk down in it, and then would knock on the door, and the people would open up the inside door and pull it
Mhm.
out. So didn't have to open the door. And they used them for mailboxes that way. And so a lady called and said, there's somebody messing with my mailbox. Somebody messing with my mailbox. So we put in a call and got them sent. And in the midst of them being on the way, she starts screaming bloody murder. And it's like, what's going on? Well, the guy just busted that little door and he's reaching his arm through that door trying to get down to where the door handle is. And it's like, okay, is he going to be able to reach it? And she's like, no, it's too far away for him to reach the handle, but his whole arm is in through this door. He's trying to get in. And so the lady is there and she's all just in hysterics. And finally, we get the police there. The guy has since yanked his arm out and run off. And we get there, and the lady is in the corner watching the door. And the police get there, and they're knocking on the door, and we're still on the phone, and I'm still on the phone with the lady. And she said, "I don't know who that is messing with my door, but I got a knife." And so it went from her having to worry about the guy at the door, and now we've got to convince this lady, okay, put the knife away and go let the police in, because that's them. That's not that guy. That's the police now. You got to go let them in. And so, yeah, there all kinds of, we used to get called like, lots of shots fired calls and just all the typical garden variety midnight calls. All of the drunks that you have to herd when the bars close at 3:00. And
right.
We used to have to herd them from one particular club to another part of town, and finally they would all scatter and go home. But yeah.
Did you ever work any day shift? And if so,
oh yeah,
which did you like better, day shift or night shift?
Well, I worked 12 years on midnights, and then I did almost 9 on days. And I am not a morning person. I don't know how I did it. It was 6 in the morning to 2. I was just brutal, because if you're a night owl by nature and you just work 12 years midnights, getting up at 5:00 in the morning is not a natural act. And then I spent the rest of the time that I had with South Bend City working on afternoon shift. And then when we all consolidated, all of the agencies consolidated under St. Joe County, I finished out my time on afternoons. And while I loved midnights, each shift has its own inherent good things and bad things. I mean, if you work midnights, if you're a night owl, it's a perfect shift. You sleep in, you got the whole day to do. After you get up, you got the whole day in the early evening to do whatever you want, and then you got to work. Days was good because once I got out of work, I was able to get, all of my running done, getting anything done that I needed to do. That was when I wasn't going home and looking for the nap,
Right. Yeah.
And which was an awful, horrible cycle, because you go home and take a nap, and then you can't go to bed when you're supposed to, and you don't go to bed early, and yeah, it's just awful cycle. So, but when you're on your days off, that's great, because you're used to getting up in the morning, so you've got lots of time to do stuff. But and if you have no family and you don't have kids, afternoons is a great shift. I never worked afternoons until my kids were grown and gone, because it was just, I couldn't do it. But once my children were grown and married, I went to afternoons, and it was perfect. It was an amazing shift. My wife worked a late shift, so she would come home after I got done, or before I got home. But we'd at least see each other in the mornings, and later on in the evenings. But yeah, afternoons was a great shift. I wish I'd have discovered it a lot sooner than I did. Plus, it was usually, you got midnights, which is usually when you come on, it's busy, and then it's busy until all of the bars close and everything winds down, and then days is usually dead until, late morning. And then you spend the last 2.5 hours kind of ramping things up. The afternoons is busy usually from sit down to go home, and usually makes a day go by quick. So I liked afternoons because the days went faster. So
see, I worked 4:30 p to 4:30 a. So
Oh boy.
yeah, that was mine. So
Ooh,
and it
wow.
seemed like it always seemed like people were holding on to whatever they needed until they got home, you know,
Mm. Hmm.
from
I know
working all
exactly what
day
you're
or
talking about.
whatever. Yes, and right at shift change, you'd be just
That's
going.
uncanny, isn't it?
It's
That is
crazy.
uncanny that people will do. It's like, okay, all of the stupid people, time to come out. It's
Yep.
time for us to go home, and it's time for you to come play. The burglars couldn't figure it out. The criminals couldn't figure it out. A shift change. The police are all, whatever. Back in the day, the guys used to have to bring their squad cars in and unload all of their crap into their own car and then
Mhm.
take the car back, and the other guys would load their car and take that car and go. They're, long before take home cars.
Mhm.
And so you would always have tons of calls waiting and pending, and you'd call a unit, 225 South Bend. I'm on the back ramp waiting for a mechanical. I'll be here for a little bit because my guy's in the middle of a burglary report. So, what do you want? I can't do anything. And
Oh
but
man.
it's like the criminals, if they were smart, they would have figured out. Okay, shift change. The police are, whatever. But all the stupid people had it figured out. All the stupid people, shift change. It's time to call. He wants
Oh
to go
man.
home. He wants to go home. It's time to call 5 minutes before shift's over.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's either that or it'd be medicals real early in the morning. So
oh,
the shifts that you're talking about, when I first started out in Florida in the small police department, we had the same type of schedule, except ours changed every 2 weeks. So it was
mm-hmm.
6A to 2P, 2P to 10P, and then 10P to 6A. And then and every 2 weeks it changed. But when you got to that midnight shift, you worked that midnight shift for a month. And then you switched to the 6A to 2P, and it was hard. It was horrible
Yeah. Now,
because
did you guys
you're
switch?
used
Did you
to it.
guys switch halfway through the year?
Uh No, no, because,
No.
so it was 8 hours. I mean, it was a very small police department, so, I don't even remember how many of us there were dispatch-wise. There wasn't many, but, no, it was just every 2 weeks. It would
Mm,
the shift would change every 2 weeks, and then, the midnight shift, it was for a month, and then we go back to that shift, and I did it that way for, what, 3 and a half, almost 4 years, and then I moved back home to Southwest Michigan where, it was 12 hours. So it was either 5A to 5P or 5P to 5A, but if you were supervisor, you went in from 4:30 to 4:30. And of course,
mm.
we have to get there at a quarter after 4 so that we can be briefed for the rest of
Yep.
the team and everything, and then start
Roll
at
call
4:30.
and yep.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It was but, even though I had, I think, maybe a 3-month, stint on days, midnights, that was my shift. That I loved midnights. What sucked, though, was that about 3 in the morning, I would either have to have a cup or 2 of coffee or an energy drink so that I could stay awake to drive those 45 minutes home, because I would
Yeah.
sometimes go into that, like, tunnel vision where after you've driven for a
Mhm.
while, you snap out of it, you're like, "How did I get this
Like,
far?"
how did I get here? Oh, I had many of those mornings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I don't even remember that. I got told one time on the way home. I got home, and the next night I came into work, and one of the county policemen from St. Joe County had called into the South Bend Dispatch Center, and he said, "Let me talk to Prue." So I got him. I got on the phone, and he said, "Do you remember what you did on the way home yesterday?" So
Oh,
I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, "On the way home," he goes, "I saw this car. I saw headlights off in the distance, and then I saw a car right behind me, and then I saw a car fly by me as it passed me and continued going like crazy. And he was in his county car. He was in his county police car,
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it. I sped right up on him, went around him, and drove home. And I was
Whoops.
like, no, I had no idea, dude. I'm so glad you didn't flip your lights on. He goes, you're lucky I knew your car. He goes, because once I saw it was you, he goes, I didn't worry about it. I figured you had something going on. You had to hurry up and get home. And I said, dude, I don't even remember that. I don't even know how I got from work home. That's crazy. I am so sorry. But yeah, I had lots of mornings like that. That was
Oh man.
nuts.
I remember working a morning shift once where I was on phones and I was just getting off of training, and there was there was a BOL that got called in, and it was for a purple Pontiac Grand Prix that was kind of swerving on the highway, and they said it had a loud muffler, and they gave the plate, and I was like, oh hell no. I said, I know who it is. And they said, what? And like I said that in dispatch, I wasn't the one taking call because they had given it out over the air already. So I called my dad. And because he was working he was working a night shift, and they're
Oh,
like, do you think he's intoxicated? I was like, no, my no, he's tired, he's just getting
oh
off of
yeah.
midnight shift.
Mhm.
So I called him up and he's like, hey, what's going on? And I said, are you falling asleep on the road? And he goes, how did you know? I said, someone just called you in. I said, you need to get off of the road if you're tired, or stop at the gas station or whatever, or just get home. And he's like, I'm gonna stop at the next stop. And so he stopped at a gas station, but I got off the phone with him, well, right before I got off the phone, he's like, thank you for calling me. I was like, well, I don't want you to crash. I said, you're going to get pulled over here in a moment if they catch up to you. And
Oh,
we called over the radio, and they said it's one of our dispatchers' parents. He was getting out of third shift, and he's dozing off, and he's like, "All right, well, I'm going to continue, see if I can catch up to him to make sure he's okay." But my dad ended up getting off at the next gas station, and he he took a little snooze, but oh man, it was hilarious. I still give him crap for that every now and then. He's like, well, I'm just glad you called me. I was like, well, I'm glad you didn't crash. I'm glad the person called on you.
yeah, yeah.
uh,
We had a supervisor on midnight shift that was a retired policeman, and
mhm.
he used to collect Studebaker, Studebaker automobiles, and he'd go to these swap meets and pick up a whole trailer full of stuff and bring them back. And one night he had picked up some parts and had his trailer on his car, was driving home during midnights, and we got a call on 911 because somebody had a trailer come off of the car and jump the sidewalk and crash into their porch.
oh, no way.
And it was our supervisor on his days off. And apparently he'd been driving a while because he didn't even notice the trailer had come off. And he went home and he got out of his car and he went in his house. Never noticed that there was no trailer behind his car. And so had to send an officer all the way out to his house to tell him, hey, are you okay there, dude? Everything's all right? Because your trailer is still in the city limits in somebody's porch.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so some of the things that you hear over the years when you see some of these things is just
uh,
the phrase, everybody knows it. There should be a T-shirt. You can't make this up.
right, yes. Yes. Oh man, yeah, exactly. A lot of people say it. I've got this excuse me, I've got this live broadcast that I do called Open Mic Live, and a
Yep.
lot of the stories that end up getting pulled on there, that's another one.
Oh yeah, I've told a story or two on there.
Yes, you have.
Yep, yep, yep.
Oh man. That is hilarious.
And
Um
if people think that that's not true, that you can't make this stuff up, then they need to tune in for that, because oh mercy, Mabel, some of those stories are amazing.
yes. I I want to move forward now that we've learned a lot more about you, and like we were saying, you've got 29 years that you had in public safety and all. Now there was something that happened to you, and I want to know when this started. You started having kind of some hearing loss, and you feel like
Yeah.
it was attributed from your dispatch career. Like, when did this start happening? What were some of those signs? And we especially want to share this as well for anyone else who might be going through something similar that they really don't know, that maybe this could be something that they're going through as well.
Yeah. Um, it's in our industry. In our industry, there are hazards, and we don't always think about what those hazards are. Um, you know, I cannot definitively say, and after speaking with an audiologist, to try and talk about it, I can't definitively say that it was, dispatch that did it. But I have a
Mhm.
profound hearing loss in both ears. I wear hearing aids in both ears, and my issue is low frequencies are fine, but I can't hear high frequencies anymore. And according to the audiologist, I started knowing or started noticing that I was having to ask things multiple times,
Mhm.
and people were having to repeat themselves, having to talk a lot louder, and I started noticing some mistakes, and there were a few times when mistakes were noticed that I didn't even know, and uh, I was called into an office one day with my supervisor, with one of the directors, and they said, "Well, we have some issues here because you're missing some stuff. The guys on the street are noticing that you're missing some things, and so we need to look into this a little bit because there could be some sort of an issue. We don't want somebody to get hurt, and we don't want something." And that obviously I didn't want that either.
Mhm.
So they got me and when we did our job, we always had to have a headset. There was never a time when we worked in the dispatch center uh, when we were sans headset. I mean, it was always, you were always plugged in, and um, lots of squeals from radios. When you work fire channel, you got the fire department tones in your ears. You got lots of screaming, hysterical people on the phone on 911. And so, all of those things add up over the years. And so they got me a headset with a better amplifier on it. Um, and that helped for a while, but because it just made things louder, but it didn't necessarily fix the frequency issue. So I happened to see again seeing an ad that was in a newspaper that they were doing free hearing tests at the hospital. So I went down and got a hearing test, and the lady said I always wore my headset on the left ear, and the lady said you have a really serious loss of hearing, high frequency in your left ear, and she said I this is just a preliminary test, but my suggestion is that you go see an audiologist. And so I did. And the audiologist ended up telling me, you really do have a serious, it's not profound, it's not, detrimental, but you have a really good hearing loss in that ear in particular. And your other ear is starting as well. So I'm going to talk to some folks and see what I can find out. Well, they found out that I dispatched, so they referred me to vocational rehab
Mhm.
here in Indiana, and vocational rehab ended up working with me, and they got me a free pair of hearing aids. And then when I went back to work, it was like night and day. It was like, okay, well, I'm hearing things I haven't heard in a long time, and so it was definitely a big plus for me. And it made it easier to hear the guys on the radio, made it easier to, and if I had somebody that was yelling or something, I had, the option to turn volumes down on hearing aids. And so it was just a complete change, a game changer for me, and took that potential liability issue off the table, and put me back in a spot where I could do the job and do it capably and with confidence again. When you're sitting there wondering if you're going to make a mistake and get called on it because of something that is going on, when that problem gets solved, then it's like, I could do this job again. Awesome, great. I'm so happy to be able to do it. And I really did love my job. I always loved my job.
Mhm.
It's never the same thing twice. I mean, you can go in, sit at the same channel, do the same agency day in and day out, but it's never the same thing twice. So that's what I loved about it. But once I retired, I had my hearing aids for probably 8-9 years, and they started to fizzle out. I just recently got a new pair, and this is a whole new generation of hearing aids. I mean, they can be programmed to do different things. They're Bluetooth enabled, so I can hook it up with my phone if I need to. You can hook them up with your iPad. It's like you can forget going and picking up your, I'm wearing this right now just because I need to cut down the noise from around me. But, it's great to be able to sit and hear the things that you've missed for so long. So I'm not of the opinion there are a lot of dispatch centers that will require a hearing test before somebody gets hired. And I'm kind of on the fence about that because there's so many variables that can go in with that. And I'm also not a fan of any dispatch center that would mandate somebody to go do it. But I think, in my opinion, a dispatcher has a personal responsibility to themselves to keep on top of that. I mean, if your voice was starting to get bad, I mean, if you get laryngitis, you don't go to work because you can't do the job right. If you have issues seeing the screen and you wear glasses, it's obvious you need to go get a checkup and see about having your glasses or your contacts improved. So your ears are almost even more of a tool, an important tool than the other two combined. Because if you can't hear, you not only are you putting yourself in a bad spot, but you can potentially put somebody in a very dangerous position. So, I don't advocate for people to be forced into it, not by any means. But if someone is a dispatcher, if you've noticed that your hearing is waning a little bit, if you notice you are asking people to repeat themselves, if you notice that the big thing for me, I noticed I didn't hear birds singing anymore because that high frequency, I just didn't hear it. And, not to mention all of the other things that go with it. It's like if you find yourself talking 2 or 3 volumes above what everybody else does, if people are always asking you to quiet down, that's a really good big red flag that something's not right. So it's just, to me, it's just a thing where I don't want to see somebody put themselves in a bad spot and then have to try and dig out of a bad situation. So
did you find at all when everything first started, um, there was a fear of actually asking for help.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, who wants to go to their director and say, you know, I think, you know, maybe my hearing's going.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm uh, and wonder whether or not they're going to say, well, it's been nice knowing you. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that this is
Exactly.
a situation. If you can't hear well, then obviously, you know, you can't. Or if you can't. We had a trainee one time that they had spent easily 2 months training, and then one day they were sitting with somebody, and their trainer, the new trainer they had sitting with them, was watching them closely, and they were leaning in and squinting at the screen, and they said, "Is it?" And the screens are huge.
Hmm.
What's the matter? Is that okay? Do you see that okay? Well, you know, I have problems with my eyes and I don't see very well. Well, maybe that's why you're not understanding some of these calls that are on the screen.
Hmm.
How did we miss that? And what can we do to try and help figure that out so that you don't, you know, and it went beyond that. I mean, they didn't end up getting the job and staying there, but they did go down and work in our records division for years. But it was a matter of, you know, getting their eyes taken care of, you know, getting some new glasses and getting things squared away so you could see what you were
Right.
doing. But yeah, it's a scary thing. It really is, because your livelihood and you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But what's scarier to me is being called into the office and being told, hey, you know, that officer, you know, yelled that he needed backup and you never heard him. You know, I mean, that's an extreme example, but we all know that there's always that potential to happen. And so, you know, not hearing that could put you in a really bad spot. So,
Yeah.
um,
Exactly.
you know, hindsight's 2020. So, you know, if and then maybe that should be a T-shirt too. Hindsight's 2020, and hearing tests are free. You know, no,
Right.
no audiologist is going to charge you. You know, there are a myriad of places that you can go to and get a free hearing test.
Right.
Unfortunately, hearing aids are not covered on insurance at all. I mean, vision, dental, dentures, all those kind of things are covered to some extent, but not hearing aids. Not a cent,
Interesting.
not a single thing. And so, you know, that's another thing that makes it really tough.
Hmm.
How am I supposed to fix this when it's going to cost me, you know, all of this money? And the things that you see on TV, they're just, you know, they're talking about, you know, you could get hearing aids for $400 or $500, and most of those are just amplifiers. That's what they are. They just make things louder. They don't solve the frequency issues. And so it's like, okay, well, things are louder now, but they're not. I still don't necessarily understand them.
Right.
Um, but so, you know, I say, having, it doesn't matter who you are. Used to be, people didn't lose their hearing until they were into their late 40s and 50s. You know, I mean, just because of aging and whatnot. But having spoken at length to a couple of different audiologists, they were advising, you know, that's not the case anymore. We live in a world of such volume that people are losing their hearing younger and younger and younger. I mean, it's not just the kid that's sitting in the thumping bass car that's sitting next to you at the intersection. And it's not just the person that's got earbuds in playing them at 10. I mean, it's you've got TVs turned up loud, movies loud, cars are loud, uh, construction equipment. I mean, I go by even now when a fire department or a police car when a fire truck or a police car goes by, I literally put my fingers in my ears if I don't have my hearing aids in. And if I do have them in, I have to pull them out because it literally hurts my ears. And, you don't miss what you have until you don't have it anymore.
Right.
And so being proactive, especially with your hearing, pays dividends if you take care of it now. When we leave the dispatch center, we take our tools with us. You take your eyes, you take your voice, you take your ears with you. Just like when a policeman leaves, he takes his gun belt and everything on it. You take your tools with you when you go home, and he's got to clean that stuff and keep it in good working order, and so do we. So it pays to be proactive with our tools, so that we can continue to do the job as long as we possibly can. So, and nobody else is going to do it for you. So,
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And I can just imagine as well that going through all of this, there's already so much pressure, right? When you are in the chair and you're taking these calls or you're on the radio, it's just pressure. It's just going and going because you don't stop. 911 doesn't stop and you have to keep going. But you add on the fact that there are certain frequencies that you can't hear. I can't even imagine how much more pressure that is because, as you said earlier, you're already feeling like, that little bit of fear that you're going to miss something or that someone might get hurt. Like you were saying, if they're yelling out or if there is, an emergency alert that's pulled, while from
yeah.
their portable or something, and you don't hear it, and someone else hears it, they're like, "What are you doing?" You're like, "What are you talking about? I didn't hear anything like that." So there's just that much added pressure, not just pressure, but stress. And then you add that
Oh, yeah.
stress onto what you're already dealing with, and then your body's probably just going haywire. But then
Mm.
you end up getting help, and you get these hearing aids, and they help you. They fix the whole frequency thing for you. And like you said, you're now hearing things that you hadn't heard in such a long time. When you get to that
Mhm.
point, how did that feel? Like, was that a relief in a
Y-
release in pressure and stress?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. My mom actually recently lost the majority of her hearing,
Mhm.
and she just got hearing aids not long ago. And I sat on the back porch with her one night, and we were just sitting there quiet. I tried to talk to her, and she shushed me and had me stop talking for a minute. And she said, "I haven't heard the birds in so long. I forgot just how beautiful it is just to sit here and listen to the songbirds in my own backyard." I mean, she'd seen them because she's got all of these bird feeders in the
Mhm.
backyard, but she's like, I haven't heard these birds in years, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's like
Wow.
you know, hearing loss is not like your eyes or you lose a tooth, you can get a replacement. You lose all your teeth, you can get dentures. Your eyesight gets bad, you get glasses, and you can pretty much correct it back right to where it's supposed to be. But
Mhm.
that's not the case with hearing. Um, there is no such thing as hearing 2020 hearing. I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. You're not going to get it back. The best you can do is to try and supplement it to the best of whatever it is you can get as far as hearing aids. And it's great because they can adjust them to whatever frequency it is that you have a deficiency in. And that's the whole idea of working with an audiologist rather than just some fly by night knucklehead who wants to sell you a piece of equipment.
Mhm.
Because they actually will work with you to figure out exactly what frequency deficiency you have, and then fix that correctly. And then, like I said, some of the great innovations with the hearing aids, with the Bluetooth and whatnot, a lot of hearing aids are programmable. So I have a program on my hearing aids that there's a front microphone and a back mic. And if I'm sitting in a restaurant or in a conference, I'll use that example. It was too long ago. I was sitting in a conference, and the people behind me were loud, and I could hear the air. Oddly enough, this is really strange. I could hear the actual air conditioning, the air return flowing, and so I have a thing on my phone that I can pull up on my phone and hit a different program, and it completely shuts off the back microphone. All it does is it keeps the front one on, so I'm paying attention to everything that's going on ahead of me. And it's my wife's favorite program because when we're at a restaurant, then I have no excuse for not paying attention. So it's like, okay, shut off the back microphone. We're out here now. You have to pay attention to what I'm saying. And so, yeah, I have no more excuse there. But and it just, it cuts out all of the background noise, and it just completely focuses everything forward. And if that was just amplified, it'd just be louder. But it not only makes it directional, but it also accentuates that frequency so I can hear. And it's a total game changer. It really is.
Wow.
And by the way, I am not a paid spokesman. Okay, I am not a paid spokesman
Right, yeah.
for any hearing aid company or any audiologist. I just should probably say that disclaimer there. So.
Yeah, no, you wanted to be able to come on not only to share your story, but to share this story as well, this piece, because there might be others out there that are dealing with something similar, and that's why I wanted you to be on here as well after you had sent that email to share this story, because who knows, there might be a lot of people out there who are dealing with something and they just don't know. So as we go into the wrap up of this episode, it's been amazing to have you on.
Thank you.
What is some advice that you would give those who are listening? And I mean, really, this could be anybody, but mostly, our target audience here, being dispatch, some of the things that they should look for, and, if they're having any issues, kind of, I know for me, like when I first started, just simply sharing my stories, because it was hard for me to get a lot of this stuff out, which is how all of this started that I'm doing now. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to be that person. I had that fear that people were going to think that I couldn't hack it, or that someone was just going to say, kind of like how you were saying earlier as well for yourself, for them to say, well, see you later. We're just going to, replace you. And that was a big fear that I had until I finally just didn't care anymore. And in the sense, not caring what anybody else thought, I wanted to help myself. So, in this sense as well, any fears or anything like that, what is some advice that you can give to others to be able to be, proactive and just look out for themselves?
Yeah. Just be aware of what's going on around you. I mean, and ask other people. I mean, that's in my case, it was asking my wife. I mean, she's the one that's around me when I'm not at work. So she's very clear on how many times she's had to repeat herself, or and it's, I get the ribbing every now and then when I say huh, or what, or anything like that, and it's not just necessarily because I don't have my hearing aids in, but because I wasn't necessarily focusing and paying attention to her. And so they don't eliminate the whole problem. That's for certain. But ask the people that are around you, your wife, your kids, your coworkers, and if I say coworkers, but I say that with a bit of discretion. Because there's always that one person that you got to watch out for, that runs right to the supervisor. Oh, he's talking about hearing problems. If you've got a close friend, and most people have 2 or 3 good friends in dispatch that they know has their back, that they can really count on. Ask them, do you see me doing things? What do you notice? And or even ask them, do me a favor and kind of when you think about it, pay attention to what I'm doing. I give you permission to pay a little bit of attention to what I'm doing, and you can turn me up on another channel, on a speaker if you want. Listen, whatever, but help me out here and give me your opinion. Let me know what you think. And but like your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your parents, whoever you're closest with, they're going to be your best barometer um, on what kind of things are right and what things are wrong, because they're the ones that are around you the majority of the time. They're going to be the ones that say, well, yeah, you turn the TV up to 70, when the rest of us normally turn it up to 25. Or they're going to be the ones that say, when we're walking somewhere and you're 10 steps ahead of me and I say something to you, you don't hear what I say. And that may seem weird, but my wife and I went on a trip once, and we were walking down the street, and I was walking about 10 feet in front of her. And this was before I got my hearing aids. And she said, I'm going to go in this store right here. And she knows me, so she knew to repeat herself louder and said, hey, I'm going in this store. And I had stopped, so she thought I heard her. She went in the store. I continued on, and it wasn't until a block and a half later I turned around to discover my wife wasn't there. And it was like, okay, where's my wife? And then I looked down to that block, and she's standing in the doorway, stomping her foot, just tapping her foot with her hand on her hip, like, what in the world were you doing?
Right.
And so, I mean, they're the ones that know you the best, that know what you hear, what you don't hear. And then if you seriously have concerns, even if you don't have a concern, there is no problem in it, and it's to your benefit to keep on top of it. I mean, you get your eyes checked, you go to the dentist, you do all of these things to be preventative. You go and get checked up at the doctor, make sure your body's working right. It can only be good for you to go and have your hearing checked. Right. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of places will do it for free. You're not obligated to buy anything. You're not obligated to sit and listen to a spiel for a half an hour for the benefits of this particular device or whatever. Those people are there. The vast majority of them are there to help you understand if there is a problem or not. So it's a great thing to have in your back pocket, just like your doctor and your dentist and whatnot, so that if there gets to that point, you don't have to go through the hassle of trying to find somebody. You already know who that person is, and they're already familiar with you. And trust me, audiologists especially love to hear stories about dispatch. They just love it. I mean, I've yet to meet a doctor, period, that didn't love hearing a 911 story. They just, you're already kind of a captive audience, so you may as well have a conversation. And if your doctor leaves the room laughing, that's much better than if they leave with shaking their head. Right. So
awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tim, for being on. This has been excellent. And I'm sure, I have no doubt that those who are listening and watching this episode, they will get something out of this, and hopefully, be proactive as well and get out there and check one of their most important assets that they have when it comes to this position.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, bud.
Oh, of course. Now, I'll be right back here with you in just a moment. If for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital, as well as Rapid Deploy and Carbine. And if you're looking for any bonus content, again, shout out to all the patrons for everything. Thank you. You can check us out and support us at patreon.com/WTT podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube. And you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.